Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. And today we're going to be unpacking some pretty fascinating research on human emotions.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, we've got excerpts from a sociology lecture and a book on the topic,
Okay.
both by Jonathan H. Turner,
Yeah.
who's a distinguished professor of sociology.
Sounds interesting.
So get ready, because we're about to go beyond those surface level feelings
Right.
and really explore the why, what, and how of human emotionality.
Okay.
Why are we so emotional?
Yeah.
What makes us different from other animals?
Right.
And how do these emotions shape our social world?
Well, one of the most intriguing things about human emotion is its sheer intensity and variety
Oh, yeah.
compared to other animals.
Right.
It really makes you wonder, why did evolution favor making humans so emotional in the first place?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
It couldn't have been just for dramatic effect, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Turner argues that emotions are actually the glue that binds us together, the very foundation of social structures and cultures.
Okay, so emotions are more than just fleeting feelings.
Yeah.
They're actually crucial to how we function as a society.
Right.
That's pretty profound. But if we're going to understand how this all works,
Yeah.
we need to look back at where we came from, our primate ancestors.
Exactly, and that's where Dr. Alexander Mariansky's research comes in.
Okay.
She used a method called cladistic analysis,
Mm.
which basically compares related species to understand their shared traits
Okay.
and figure out how they evolved.
Gotcha.
Her research focused on social structures in primates,
Uh-huh.
and she discovered a fascinating pattern.
Okay.
Monkeys tend to have very tight-knit social structures,
Oh.
while apes, our closer relatives, have weaker social ties.
So how did humans who are descended from these less social apes
Right.
evolve into the deeply social creatures we are today?
Yeah.
It seems like a real evolutionary puzzle.
It is, and the key to this puzzle lies in the different social patterns of monkeys and apes. You see, in ape societies, females typically leave their natal groups when they reach maturity. This constant disruption of social bonds leads to those weaker social structures compared to monkeys where females stay in their groups.
That makes sense. So if our ancestors were wired for these weaker social ties,
Right.
what happened to change that? How did we become the social butterflies we are today?
Well, imagine our hominid ancestors trying to survive on the harsh African savanna.
Oh, yeah.
They were constantly facing threats from predators
Yeah.
and competition for resources. It was
Yeah.
a real struggle to make it out there.
Wow, that paints a pretty intense picture.
Yeah.
So how did emotions help them survive in such a challenging environment?
In this environment, natural selection would have favored any trait that gave our ancestors an edge.
No.
And according to Turner, that edge came from enhanced emotional capacity.
Okay.
Emotions allowed for rapid information processing, attention regulation, memory enhancement, and even a sense of morality, all crucial for survival.
So in a way, emotions were a kind of secret weapon for our ancestors.
Exactly. Emotions allowed them to react quickly to danger,
Okay.
make snap decisions,
Right.
and build trust within their groups.
Uh-huh.
It wasn't just about feeling,
Yeah.
it was about surviving.
Okay.
William Wentworth even argued that emotions were crucial for establishing moral codes, which would have been essential for maintaining social order in these early hominid groups.
Okay, so emotions played a critical role in survival.
Right.
But how did this actually play out in the brain? Did the brains of our ancestors physically change?
They did. As humans evolved, subcortical areas of the brain,
Okay.
which are responsible for processing emotions,
Right.
became significantly larger compared to our ape relatives.
Wow.
It's a testament to just how important emotions were for our survival.
That's incredible. It's like our emotional centers literally grew
Yeah.
as we face these challenges.
That's right. And this growth highlights the point that emotions weren't just a side effect of evolution.
Yeah.
They were a driving force in shaping who we are today.
Yeah. So we've got this picture of our ancestors on the savannah facing all these challenges, and their emotions are becoming more and more important for their survival. But how did these emotions actually help them build stronger social structures? I mean, it seems like a pretty big leap from feeling fear to forming complex society.
It is a big leap, but it happened gradually over time. Turner and Mariansky argued that these early hominids formed social structures they call hordes,
Hordes.
which predated the family unit as we know it today. They suggest that these hordes were initially based on strong bonds between mothers and their adult sons,
Okay.
along with bonds between adult males.
So those relationships probably strengthened by their emotional connections,
Right.
became the building blocks for something bigger.
Exactly. And as the hominid brain continued to evolve
Okay.
and infants required longer periods of care,
Yeah.
the pressure to create a more stable reproductive unit, the family would have increased.
So it wasn't just about surviving in the moment.
Yeah.
Emotions were actually laying the groundwork for the evolution of human society as we know it. But I'm still curious about how those basic emotions evolved into the complex social interactions we see today.
Well, let's look at Wentworth's argument about what he calls the ingredients for strong social ties.
Okay.
He lists positive emotions, interpersonal attunement, emotional entrainment exchange of valued resources sanctioning, and moral coding.
Okay.
And if you think about it, each of those relies heavily on our ability to experience and understand emotions.
So those key elements of social cohesion, the things that allow us to form groups, societies, and cultures, are all deeply rooted in our emotional capacities.
Yeah.
But how did something like emotional entrainment, which sounds pretty complex, even begin to develop in those early hominids?
It likely started with simple mirroring of emotions. For example, if one member of a group felt fear,
Okay.
others might unconsciously mimic that fear, creating a shared emotional state that could help them coordinate their actions and respond to danger more effectively.
That makes sense. It's like a primitive form of empathy developing.
Right. How did those early emotional responses evolve into something as nuanced as moral coding?
Well, as groups became more cohesive, the need to establish and enforce rules of conduct became more and more important.
Okay.
And emotions,
Yeah.
particularly negative emotions like anger and shame, would have played a key role in this process.
Sure.
Those who violated social norms faced the wrath of the group expressed through those negative emotions.
So those negative emotions acted as a deterrent,
Right.
helping to keep individuals in line and maintain order within the group.
Exactly. But it wasn't just about punishment.
Right.
Positive emotions such as approval and acceptance also played a role in reinforcing desirable behaviors.
Gotcha.
It was a combination of both that helped shape behavior and maintain social harmony.
So it was like a system of rewards and punishments, all driven by emotions.
Right.
But how did that system develop into the complex moral codes we see today?
As those hominid groups evolved, they developed shared values and beliefs that became deeply intertwined with powerful emotions.
Violating those values wasn't just about breaking a rule.
Yeah.
It was about triggering intense emotional responses within the group.
It's fascinating to think that something as fundamental as our emotions played such a pivotal role in the development of everything from basic social bonds to those complex moral codes that govern so much of human behavior today.
It is, but it's important to remember that this evolutionary journey wasn't just about emotions working in isolation.
Okay.
It was about the interplay of emotions with other evolving capacities, like our ability to think, remember, and communicate. To really understand the complexity of human emotion, we need to consider how all of these systems work together.
So it was a real symphony of brain power, with emotions playing a key role in shaping the melody. And speaking of the brain, I'm curious to know more about how emotions are actually processed in that incredibly complex organ. So we've talked about the evolution of emotions and how they shape social structures, but I think it's time we really get into the nuts and bolts of how emotions work inside the brain. What's going on in that complex network of neurons that allows us to feel such a wide range of emotions?
Well, we've already touched on the limbic system, which is home to some of the key players in the emotional symphony, like the amygdala and the hippocampus.
Right, those are the areas that seem to light up when we experience really intense emotions like fear or joy.
Hmm.
They're like the emotional control centers of the brain.
Exactly. But there's another crucial part of the brain that plays a huge role in how we experience and regulate emotions, the prefrontal cortex.
Okay.
This is the area responsible for higher level thinking, planning, and decision making. And what's really fascinating is that the prefrontal cortex is directly connected to those emotional centers in the limbic system.
So our rational brain and our emotional brain are constantly talking to each other. That makes a lot of sense, actually. It explains why we can sometimes talk ourselves down from a panic attack or resist those impulsive urges.
That's exactly right. This connection allows us to process our emotions, make sense of them, and integrate them into our decision making. But of course, we don't always succeed in controlling our emotions, do we? Sometimes it feels like our emotions completely hijack our rational thoughts.
I think we've all been there. It's like sometimes our emotions have a mind of their own. Why do you think that is?
Well, remember that our emotional systems, especially those rooted in the amygdala, are incredibly ancient and powerful.
Right.
They evolved to keep us safe from threats. in a
Yeah.
world that was much more dangerous than the one we live in today. So they can trigger those lightning fast reactions before our conscious mind even has a chance to process what's happening.
It's like having a super sensitive alarm system that's constantly on high alert, even when there's no real danger present.
That's a great way to put it. And that's why understanding this interplay between our emotional and rational brains is so important. It's about finding that balance between harnessing the power of our emotions and preventing them from ruling our lives.
You mentioned earlier this idea of an unconscious emotional memory system.
Yeah.
And it sounds a little bit like something out of a science fiction movie. Can you explain what that is and why it's important?
It's actually a very real phenomenon. We store emotional memories not just in our conscious minds, but also in these deeper subcortical regions of the brain. And these memories can have a powerful influence on our emotions and behaviors even without our conscious awareness.
So it's like we're carrying around all this emotional baggage that we don't even realize is there.
In a way, yes. And these unconscious emotional memories can be incredibly powerful. They can shape our reactions to people and situations, trigger automatic responses, and even influence our decisions in ways that we don't fully understand.
So how do scientists even begin to study something as complex and intangible as emotions? I mean, you can't exactly hold an emotion in your hand and examine it under a microscope.
It's definitely a challenging field,
Yeah.
but neuroscientists are making incredible strides using brain imaging techniques like fMRI.
Okay.
These tools allow researchers to observe which areas of the brain light up when people experience different emotions.
Wow, so they can actually see the brain feeling emotions in real time? That's pretty amazing.
It is. And these studies are revealing some fascinating insights. For example, they found that different emotions activate distinct patterns of brain activity. Fear, for instance, triggers a very strong response in the amygdala, while happiness often lights up areas associated with reward and pleasure.
It's incredible how something as subjective as a feeling can be mapped onto these physical structures in the brain.
It really highlights the profound connection between our physical and emotional selves. And this growing understanding of the neurobiology of emotions is helping us unlock the mysteries of how emotions shape our behaviors, relationships, and even our social structures.
Well, I think it's safe to say that from the savannah to the screen, emotions are these powerful driving forces in our lives. We've uncovered some truly fascinating insights during this deep dive, but it's clear that there's still so much more to learn about this complex world of human emotion. What are your final thoughts on all this?
I think what's most remarkable is that our emotions aren't just these personal experiences we have in isolation. They're deeply social phenomena that have played a crucial role in our evolution, shaping our relationships, our societies, and ultimately who we are as human beings.
It's incredible to consider how these complex emotions, these feelings we experience every day, have had such a profound impact on the course of human history. Thanks for joining us today for this deep dive into human emotions. Until next time.